All right, everybody, I want to welcome y'all to our session. We have kind of a spread out crowd, so I thought I'd get out here and mingle a little bit. We have got 3 terrific presenters, or at least me and 2 terrific presenters. And we're also going to have a couple minutes at the end for questions. So we're going to shoot for maybe like 10, 10, 10, and then 10 minutes at the end for questions. So if you have questions, maybe save them until all 3 of us have finished talking. And I think with that, I think I will actually just crack on since, actually we got a couple more people coming in. Since we're, the 40-minute sessions is cool. What do you guys think about the 40-minute sessions? I think that's interesting. Close down. I'm used to like hour, right? But like 40 minutes, you gotta like squeeze it in a little bit more. You get a little more time for questions. I think it's a cool thing. So to introduce myself, my name is Jason Preem. I'm going to be talking about something that my nonprofit built. Impact Story is my nonprofit. And we built this thing called PaperBuzz to help people get Altmetrics in an open way. And after I'm done talking, we're going to hear from James from PKP, the Public Knowledge Project, and we're going to hear from Robin for a library perspective on kind of what this all means, maybe from a library point of view. And then again, like I said, time for questions. So I forgot my little clicker. Let me see that. So this is kind of a sneak peek. I'm not really sure why that's upside down there. I'm doing. Have any of y'all heard of PowerPoint karaoke? Has anybody heard of that? Yeah, so I'm kind of doing that. Like my co-founder Heather was supposed to give this talk, but at the last minute, something came up and she wasn't able to be here. So I'm not super familiar with these slides, so I may end up making some stuff up to meet the slides. We'll see what happens. So already the first hurdle, we've got upside down in the slides. I don't know what that's all about. But we made this thing. It's called PaperBuzz, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about. Y'all are maybe familiar with Altmetrics. Anybody raise your hand if you heard of this? You see this? That look familiar? Fantastic, great. I guess that's maybe sort of a like, a little bit of a selection bias, but it's great to see that they've had a lot of success. That altmetric term, I have a little what's the word? Affection for that term. That was the term that I made up on Twitter about 6 years ago, something like that, and I said, oh, Altmetrics, I like this idea of Altmetrics. And Ewan80, who was working at, I believe, Nature at the time, said, well, that's a good word, why don't I make a company out of that? So we made a company out of it, and he's got these people, Altmetrics.com, very, very good company. I think they do a terrific job. I love Ewan as a person, he's a really great guy. But they do have, they have some advantages, right? They've got comprehensive data about Altmetrics, right? So they can show you who's tweeted the work, who's Facebooked the work, who's shared it on Wikipedia, right? These are questions that are interesting for us to learn about scholarship, right? And that's something that's, again, near and dear to my heart. Like I kind of did the first 2 conferences on Altmetrics. I've been really trying to make Altmetrics a thing in a lot of my PhD work. And I'm really happy to see lots of people using this. Lots of people trying to say, let's find a broader picture of impact of science. And let's do it by looking at how science is shared on the internet. Right? We can track these traces, these footprints in the snow, I always like to say, about, before, if you got people running around all over the place, and you can imagine the world, and everyone's running around, and they're really interested in this, they're really interested in that, but it's all on rocks, and you can't tell where they've been. Maybe they're interested in this, maybe, who knows? But then imagine there's snow that falls on that world, right? On all this rock, now there's a layer of snow. And now, when everybody goes up here, you can see their footprints. When everybody goes up here, you can see their footprints. And that's the idea of Altmetrics, right? We can track these footprints through the snow, this new snow that's the online environment where it used to be when I would talk to someone at a conference, my words, like, they just disappear, right? But now, if I talk to you on Twitter, now the words are there. Now we can track them. That's that snow, right? So we're getting that. We're getting that from altmetric.com. I think that's really exciting. I think Ewan's done a great job. It's easy to use. You can use it for free if you're a researcher, which is really convenient. And it's got lots of details for all kinds of people. And again, I apologize if I keep looking back here. I'm not super familiar with the slides. But it has some downsides, right? One of the big downsides is sort of a closed source environment. So if I wanted to see how all that data is gathered, that's not something that Ewan is sharing right now, right? It's kind of a business that he's trying to sort of keep a little bit private. It also costs money, so if I want Altmetrics for my journal, of course I'm gonna have to pay money, and that's obviously he's got to feed all the people who work for Altmetric, right? They got like I think like 40 people or 30 people working for them now or something. It's a pretty successful business. And if I wanted to start a startup on this, right? We get a lot of people who say, I want to make a plugin for Chrome that helps people discover new scientific content. And when it does, it also checks to find out who's tweeted it. That'd be pretty cool, but it's not very easy to do with a closed source system, right? You're not going to be able to get that data for free. Maybe you're working as an undergrad. You don't have a lot of money to just throw at altmetric.com. So it has these downsides, right? And these downsides really just come, they're byproducts of the idea of, I'm going to sell the data. As soon as you make that choice, right? Like, I've got the data. Want to look? It costs you money, but I got it. Right? As soon as you make that choice, you inhibit a lot of the types of reuse that you could use. And of course, it's sort of a philosophical perspective that says, well, if we are mining this data that comes from a network of scholars, in many cases talking about scholarly stuff, for free, if they're giving us all this data for free, why are we charging for it? Like, it doesn't deserve to be free, doesn't deserve to be open. So that's kind of a philosophical point of view that you may or may not subscribe to. So really exciting development in the last couple of years. Crossref, y'all are familiar with Crossref, has decided, why don't we collect Altmetrics? We could do this as Crossref. We could collect all these metrics, put them in a database somewhere, and we could give them to people. And that way, they would be open. Right? Because Crossref has this sort of philosophy where they're trying to do things more in the open, which is great. So they've done this, and it's really exciting. It's open source. It's open data. It's free for everybody. Right? So not just a researcher, anybody who wants this can use it. So that's a great development. I think it's really exciting. Again, as a person who's been very involved in Altmetrics sort of from the beginning, when I see this, I'm like, sweet. This is great. Open data for Altmetrics. I'm really happy about that. But it does have some downsides. It's not so easy to use, is one of the biggest downsides. And it's very important that it be easy to use. So I can give some examples of easy to use somewhere. There we go. So this is the OSREF event data API. And as you can see, there's quite a lot. This is one event. So this is one event on Wikipedia. And there's quite a lot of information there. It's a lot of stuff that I think is a little confusing to look at. Moreover, for Wikipedia, they're sort of changing their Wikipedia model back and forth right now. But in particular for Wikipedia, there's a lot of events being emitted. So every time a page changes, they've been emitting a Wikipedia event. So what that means is, if you were to look at all of the Altmetrics that have happened in the last year, 90% of them are Wikipedia events. Which is not true. This is actually just sort of an artifact of the way they're doing it. So this is not to slam Crossref by any means. I think they're doing a great job and they're doing something important. But it's not very easy to use. That's, I think, the sort of the take home that we're trying to point out about this. I think our slides are a little bit off the top there. But if we were going to try and build a layer on top of that, something that would be easy to use, some of the things that we would need is we need to make sure that it's not closed, right? Because the old-timey ways are sort of transparent and closed. We want to find a new open way to do it. We have built this. It's called Paperbuzz. It's, as you see up there, it's not quite done yet. It's still sort of in progress. We're kind of seeing this as a sneak peek. But we wanted to kind of present what we do have. We've got 35 million events so far. Again, most of those are from Wikipedia. But what we want to do is try and solve this problem with the Crossref one, where it's a kind of at a low level of abstraction, and there's not a lot of summaries. We want a higher level of abstraction where you can just say, hey, tell me what you know about this article. And we're not going to give you necessarily 100 or 200 or 500 specific little fiddly events, but instead we'll maybe give you 10 things that you really wanted to know that are very straightforward. When we decided that we wanted to try and build this thing, where we said, hey, this would be great to build, it wasn't our idea. This actually came from PKP. PKP came to us, and I'm not going to go too much into that because James is going to cover that, but I definitely did want, it's a good time to say right now, this is a collaboration between Impact Story, our nonprofit, and PKP, which is another nonprofit. So it's kind of one of the cool things about the system, and it's using data from Crossref, which is another nonprofit. So this is very sort of a, well, I don't know, if you go in for all that bleeding heart stuff, I think that it's sort of a nice community-led sort of thing that's about being open source, open data, free for everybody. It's like Crossref event data, but at a higher level of abstraction. And abstraction, right, is that idea of, instead of giving you all of the nitty-gritty dissertation, maybe just give me the article in Nature, right? Like that's kind of maybe the little bit like higher level of summary that we're shooting for. The audience is everybody, so we definitely want it to be used by journals. We definitely want it to be used by researchers. We definitely want it to be used by people who are making cool open source tools, as well as by institutions and funders who are trying to say, hey, like maybe what's the overall, the broader impact of the work that we're funding? It's very heavily built on an API right now. And so the idea is that you will be able to build tools on top of this API, right? So it's a computer-oriented way of, it's focused on helping other machine systems use that data, but it also does have a front end. So I showed you this kind of, in my mind, sort of confusing version, and this is the much shorter, simpler version, right? So each event just has those 3 lines. So it's pretty easy to use for a developer. All you need to do is just throw a DOI at it. If you say, here's a DOI, we say, great, here are the Altmetrics. Just look under sources, events, boom, 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 boom. So it's pretty straightforward for someone maybe who doesn't have a ton of experience doing code. It simplifies events, it includes counts, it includes summary stats. So for instance, we include a histogram right off the bat in the API to say how much activity was there every day. So you can kind of, over the history of an article, you can say, wow, people started off being really bored and uninterested by this article, but eventually they got really excited about it. Or, more frequently, people start off real excited and the interest kind of goes down as the time to publication lags, right? But you can see that, and you could, for instance, identify outliers. So have you guys heard of this guy, Van Ron, did a paper a long time back called Sleeping Beauties in Science, which I thought was so cool. He said, what kinds of papers get published? They get crickets right off the bat, but then years later, people are like, oh, what a genius, this paper is so important, and then it gets tons of citations. We could try and look for what are the sleeping beauties in science from an Altmetrics perspective. What things are boring at first, but then people are really excited about. So we can build an algorithm right now. If you wanted to build a machine that could scroll through our data, identify Twitter sleeping beauties in science, and say, hey, here's those two sleeping beauties in science to recommend to people. You can do that right now in this open data, which we're excited about. So it also includes a website, which is also free for everybody, also based off of the DOI, and also includes all the events. We think that's important because a lot of people do not, don't speak API, and so we want to make sure that you can go to the API. That is live on the internet right now, so if you want to go to unpaywall.org, you can check it out. You can paste a test DOI in there, and once you do that, you'll be able to see the kind of data that we can get for that particular DOI. Also, we have a source of unpaywall views, which is pretty cool. Anybody here heard of unpaywall? Raise your hand if you're unpaywall. Wow, that's awesome. That's super exciting. Unpaywall, for those of you all who don't know, is a plugin for the Chrome and Firefox browsers that when you encounter a toll access scientific article, it checks to see if there's an open access copy somewhere on the internet, and if so, it gives you a link to that open access copy. So what's neat about this is we have 100,000 people using Unpaywall. Unpaywall is an open source free thing that we did at Impact Story. We have 100,000 people, 108,000 something, using Unpaywall right now today. And they generate 80,000 views on articles every single day, and that all goes through that system. So we can look and see what do people who use Unpaywall read. Now we're not logging names or anything like that, but we do just have sort of the raw logs in our all the API calls that people make. And so we're able to say, what if that was an Altmetric, right? What if we could say how many Unpaywall viewers read this thing? So we actually are able to put that in the paper-bus system too. We're sort of experimenting with that, partly because I think there are some privacy concerns, so we want to be really careful at respecting people's privacy. And so it kind of goes in and out right now as we sort of hear feedback. So if you guys have thoughts about that, I'd love to hear them later on about how we can use that data source as a readership Altmetric at the article level, but also still really respect the privacy of people who are using it. So that's Unpaywall, I think we discussed. So that's an example of Unpaywall. This gives you a little green tab when we could find a free version. And that's, I guess, some facts about Unpaywall, which I already told you. And that's Unpaywall views there in the API. And also, we built this thing, which was pretty fun, to show what's buzzing this week. We kind of wanted to give an example of, and unfortunately I don't have a picture here, but you can imagine it in the world of imagination. We had an example of a thing where we said, what is the hottest open access research content this week? Right, so a lot of science gets published, research gets published every day, every week, whatever, and some percentage of it is open access. And as someone who's interested in science, people, a lot of times they subscribe to sort of curated collections of this. So like IFL Science, right, on Facebook. Anybody ever heard of that one? No, yes, no, maybe. Anyway, these various curated lists, right, or Discover Magazine or something like that. What exciting science that I, as a lay reader, would like today? Well, we're able to do that automatically. So we built that automatically. We said, what are the most tweeted things? What are the most Facebook things? What are the most, actually Facebook. What are the most Wikipedia things this week? We can automatically collect those using the PaperBuzz API, and then we can build a web app on top of that, right? And again, we did this in a couple days. It was super easy, and it illustrates how much you can do when you have this data and it's open and anybody can use it. So, PaperBuzz. It is from PKP and Impact Story. I think that is basically what I wanted to leave you with. And I think I'm sort of ish on time, and James is going to go for it. Thank you. And that. All right, great.
Do you know where the...
That should be on the bottom. Yeah.
Where did it go?
Good. That way I can see you.
Good idea. This is like once every 6 months somebody uses this thing. I can't remember where the full screen version. All right. Thanks, everybody. Is this mic working? You can hear me okay? Great. My name is James McGregor. I'm the Associate Director of Strategic Projects and Services at Public Knowledge Project. I've been with them for 10 years, almost exactly, 10 years as of November 1st. It's been a great ride so far. I'm really excited about this particular partnership because I've been working in the stats area with PKP and OJS for almost all of those 10 years. And the one thing I've learned is that running a service based on metrics is really, really difficult, and it's good that somebody else is doing it. That we're happy just to be able to partner with that and to work on adding some extra features on top of it. So when I'm talking about PKP, I really mean OJS. And I'm assuming that most people are familiar here with Open Journal Systems. It's an open source application. It's almost 20 years old at this point. It's actually 19 years old. And about 10,000 journals on the web use it to actively run their journal online. By actively, I mean they publish 10 or more articles per year using Open Journal Systems. At this point, last I checked, which actually was in 2016, about 1/10 of all Crossref memberships were actually OJS journals. Not quite sure about how many DOIs specifically. So we're an open source application, and we promote open access to scholarly research. And those two things are really important to us, and in particular with the relationships that we build within the community. Whether that's with Crossref, who have been partners with us for a long time, now Impact Story, and in particular with this PaperBuzz service. Within OJS, so within a scholarly journal context, most people are interested in sort of usage counts. So they have article view counts. We can do that. We can sort of conglomerate article view counts from within OJS about how many people have viewed an article abstract, downloaded a PDF, read a full text HTML file, that kind of content. We can do that within OJS, no problem. We allow people to develop, or we have people develop, other services or other associated plugins or extra added bits of functionality within OJS to retrieve other types of article statistics or metrics. These include Plum Analytics, Altmetrics, which Jason already mentioned, Crossref's Cited By service, our own Legato service. I don't know if anybody here is familiar with Legato. It was developed by PLOS to provide an article level metrics or an Altmetrics service very, very similar to what Event Data does. We did run one of those at one point on our own. That's what I meant by we know that it's difficult to manage, even as an open source project, to run this software and to keep it going and to troubleshoot when it's not your area of expertise is very, very challenging. So we no longer run that. But we are looking at now this PaperBuzz partnership, and we're really excited about that. And I just have a few slides as to why specifically we're excited about this, why we approached Impact Story to do this originally. I believe, Jason, you and Juan Pablo Alperin have had a long history of talking about this. So Juan Pablo is a professor, faculty research fellow with PKP, who's been working with Altmetrics, especially and in particular in the Global South, for I'd say the past 6 or 7 years now. And again, this has been sort of focused on part of our growing our community and trying to develop the tools that everybody can use, regardless of their income or geographic distribution or anything like that. So why PaperBuzz in particular is exciting for us. It is community focused. The goal is to develop a useful tool for the larger scholarly publishing community, regardless of income or what they can afford or what level of faculty they are or happen to be at the time. It's developed by scholars, for scholars. And it also supports and strengthens some of the partnerships that we've had over the past 10 years, 20 years that we think are important. Number one, Impact Story, but also with Crossref. We've been dealing with their developers on the event data over time, just talking with them back and forth. We have a close relationship with them, and we like to see that strengthen, in particular with this. One of the areas that I am particularly happy about is the clearly defined workspaces. So at this point, at least, Impact Story takes care of the service and manages the API. So they're developing the structure that actually anybody can use, really. It's not just restricted to PKP. At the same time, PKP takes this API and this service and our understanding of how to integrate that with our software, and we'll develop a plugin that will apply that to the software itself. So before too long, we'll release a PaperBuzz plugin, an implementation plugin for OJS. If you use OJS, you'll be able to install it, and then it'll display those usage stats, those metrics that Jason was talking about within the application itself. And it won't be the JSON, I don't think. The trick here is it'll actually be like a really nice visualization. You know, you'll have charts depicting those growth patterns that Jason had been talking about, and so on and so forth. That's done on the OJS side of things, but the content, that information comes from PaperBuzz via that API. It is going to be a general service rather than a specific solution. So if you think about, for example, Crossref cited by service, that really just kind of pinpoints one specific data point. The exciting thing about PaperBuzz is that it will grow over time to include more data points and more types of information. One of the bits actually that Juan wanted me to mention to you about is Facebook integration. I think is coming up in the near future as well. So, you know, it won't just be what you see today is what you'll have in the next 10 years. It'll actually, I think, grow substantially there. And that will be grown through through a continuing relationship between Impact Story, Crossref, and PKP. And then finally, but I think maybe most importantly, it is open source. It is non-proprietary. This does serve to drastically reduce the barrier to entry for other people who want to use it or want to get involved in it. It decentralizes the ownership of the actual API, the code, and also the data behind the scenes that comes from Crossref event data. We've been an open source and an open access project since our birth, and that's hardwired into how we do these things. And that's a significant bonus for us there. I think we're safe in saying it's going to look really nice when we have that plugin, and the visualization will be great, and the visualization will change over time, and other folks can manage all that. But the core there is that it is non-proprietary, open source, information and code there. So people can take that and do what they want with it, and have the assurances that open source provides. So I'm just going to stop there. I'm going to turn it over to Robin here for a follow-up on the library perspective of things.
Hello. So I'm Robinson. I work at Johns Hopkins University up in Baltimore, and I'm their scholarly communications specialist. And I wish my decision not to have slides was a little more forethought than it's going to sound as I tell you, but I knew I would hear a lot of things, even just this morning at the conference, that was going to influence how I responded to all of this. So no slides for me. First, with the number of libraries that run OJS, this ability to pull Crossref data in and provide some kind of metrics is going to be outstanding. We use the OJS platform at Hopkins. I work with a gentleman who manages it there, and this is going to be really good. We have a combination of both student-run and professional journals. So I think the students are going to actually probably end up gamifying it, but you know, that's okay. They're student journals, they can do that. I think the other aspect for this, the openness and community is important. There's been discussions lately in the information area about you know, do you want to support only nonprofit? Is it a mix? And it's you know, it's everybody's individual choice, but at least now there's a choice. There's some stuff that's a little closed and takes a subscription. There's stuff that's more open and is going to be free. For those universities, libraries that have larger staffs and have programmers, they're going to be able to also take advantage of this and maybe do some tweaks and things like that to accommodate APIs they build on top of this as well. I could foresee maybe being able to pull some kind of information into research management projects or content management systems so faculty can have something on their, you know, their page where they have their articles listed. We often get requests coming to the libraries like, why doesn't PubMed use something I can really link to, and why is there no author identifier in PubMed? So hopefully author identification and all these things, as James and Jason were saying, are going to come in down the road. which isn't a bad thing, because that means we have influence over what comes in down the road. If we're going to think about using this open source community-driven project, let's drive it. Let's help them make some decisions about what's important to our administrators and our users, and what do we really want to count. We might as well take advantage of it, have some conversations, and see if things can bubble up and get more than just Facebook numbers, you know. Maybe there are other things out there. Someone earlier this morning was talking about, she was talking about, it was in the Research Information the RIM discussion. She's from Syracuse, and she was saying that, they've got these, the RIM is up now, and so the physicists are all up there because they have all the DOIs and everything. And she's like, so the dance and the visual arts people want to be up there too, and now I need to figure out how to do that, So there's lots of people we need to pay more attention to that outside the STEM areas. STEM is a great place to start. I'm from Hopkins, I have to think about STEM, but maybe we can do better by other people. So I'm just excited that there's an alternative, and I'm looking forward to hearing more from Jason and James and PKP and Impact Story. So thank you, and we've given you lots of times for questions, I hope. So please come up to the mic and ask questions.
I think I'm off. Yeah, you can either already shout from there or the mic. Either way, we got about 10 minutes. So any questions? Right off the bat? If not, I can fly out.
Does it only focus on the sciences, or is it in the sciences as well, like economics and things like that? Yeah, you just go over certain sources, or?
Yeah, great question. And if we get that in here, is it only in the sciences, or is it across social sciences and other fields as well? And right now, it's everything, and for the, I guess, probably foreseeable future, it's everything with the DOI. And so to the extent that a particular field uses a lot of DOIs, you cover that field quite well. And so in practice, that is certainly the sciences. Social sciences is generally pretty strong as well with DOIs. Humanities is like sort of so-so, particularly monographs. A lot of them don't have DOIs, but a lot of them do. And then, yeah, something like visual art or dance, something like that, very low usage of DOIs, so you have very low usage of the system. And it's sort of something to keep in mind anytime we're talking about all metrics or any metrics, right? When we talk about citation metrics, so much. Yes, excellent. When we talk about citation metrics, that's another thing, right? Same thing that's like it's not very well represented within the the traditional citation indices. Did you guys have other stuff to mention on that?
I just start talking? Is that all right? There we go. Technology is amazing. I just wanted to note too that other services do typically require DOIs for them to work. I know the Legato service did. I kind of want to say Plum Analytics does. I'm not 100% sure there.
Altmetric.com does,
Yeah.
Or an archive-ity.
Yeah. So it's a common requisite, and yeah, kind of a standard, I think.
Yep, and it's a great point. If you want to dig a little deeper into it, a lot of that has to do with it's difficult to determine that someone on the internet is referring to a scholarly article, right? And by title, for instance, is a really tricky way to try and find that. Whereas if you just search for the 10 dot whatever part of a DOI, it becomes a lot easier. So I think that's partly the kind of Altmetrics field has moved in that direction, partly just because of ease, which is always a little bit of a little unsatisfying in some ways, but it is where we are. Yeah, great question. So would this work for books, and particularly books that have the multiple refer DOIs? Are you talking about like within components of the book? Gotcha. DOIs for interstitial landing pages because there are multiple locations. And yeah, it would. Yep. I think probably the part that it would not work so well at is combining those DOIs into one work. That's a real challenging, I think, area for all kinds of areas in scholarly communication is when you've got people referring to the same entity, the same person, the same paper, the same book by multiple names. Combining those into one, I think, is a real challenge. So we wouldn't do that, but for a specific DOI, or if you want to do the work on your own of saying, oh, these are the 10 DOIs that could refer to this book, then you would be able to get the information in one spot.
Actually, one follow-up, just maybe a question for clarification here. We're talking about cross-ref DOIs mostly, but data set DOIs as well, I think, are okay or will be?
Yeah, it's a good question. We're actually in talks with Crossref about whether data site DOIs would be included or not, and we're not sure yet.
One aspect of Altmetrics that my research is really like is policy. Do you guys have any plans to delve into policy, government, impact, that kind of?
Yeah, great question. And it's good to hear that researchers are interested in that. About policy documents, citations from policy documents is in altmetric.com. And no, we don't have that now, and it's not on the near-term roadmap. It's a pretty hard problem, and super interesting. I met a guy who's really interesting who was doing clinical guidelines. He has a Swedish startup, and he's mining as all the world's clinics, starting with Swedish, but all the world's clinical guidelines to see what things they cite. And he's going to make an Altmetrics service of that, which I think would be like so cool. Especially, it's really interesting, it's really challenging because a lot of times they will actually say what things they didn't include. So they'll cite studies to say, we did not use these studies. And you got to obviously so you got to like teach the machine to identify. I know, right? It's like, but yeah, so that's the short version of that.
This may sound a little off the wall, but I mean, with journal articles, we also getting into the world of a lot of annotation, comments, and great to be able to track those as well. That's something you are thinking about?
Yeah, we are. That's a great question. The question was about, are we tracking annotations on journal articles, which seems to be an area of growing interest. And it is, and I think it's a terrific question, and it's an area where, in my mind, a lot of scholarly communication is eventually going to go. Someone, certainly I can't take credit for this, said a while back, and I love it, is everything in the scholarly communication world is either data or an annotation. Everything. So you got a data set and then a paper, that's an annotation on a data set, right? It says, here's what the data says, here's why we think it matters, here's why we collect it in the first place, et cetera. That's an annotation, right? A peer review, that's an annotation on another annotation. It's an annotation on a paper, right? And then that has a response. So everything is an annotation. I think that's a really cool way of looking at how we communicate science and the scholarship as a whole. And I think projects like Hypothesis are doing a pretty great job of trying to build structures, open structures that can help us do that kind of annotation. Publons is another one that I think is very interesting. So yeah, we would absolutely love to include those. The tricky thing is both those, so Hypothesis and Publons come to mind right away. Neither of those infrastructures are super mature in terms of the amount of usage that they're seeing. And so then there's always a trade-off between implementing something that will track these sources and understanding that there's very little actual traffic, and so people are like, great, you've got Hypothesis. Let me see how much Hypothesis is on my paper. Probably not tons, unfortunately. Like, I would love it if it were lots, but the modal number for a lot of these altmetrics is 0, right? Like, even for something like Wikipedia. How many Wikipedia citations does a given paper have? If you guess 0, you probably win the prize, because in most cases, Wikipedia doesn't cite that many papers, right? So it's hard to, and I think Hypothesis is an even trickier, or Publons is an even trickier case. That we used to support Publons and Impact Story, actually, and dropped it for that reason. There just wasn't enough data there. But as these systems grow, as much as anyone in the world will say, eventually it's all going to be there. And eventually, once it is, we're going to track it all. So the question is, how long of a timescale is eventually? You guys have other thoughts? Sorry, I'm up here because I'm always moving around. Sorry.
No, please. I have a question, though.
Yeah.
So, and this is because I don't talk to the people at Crossref. Are they thinking about expanding who they're willing to create DOIs for, like scholarly blogs or things like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And we do talk to them about that. Yeah, I think they have, I've heard an unnamed source within Crossref say the problem is we spent so much time trying to convince everyone to make DOIs, and now we're like, stop, not so many DOIs. Which I think is interesting. That's their perspective, and I wouldn't necessarily jump to that. I think from their perspective, saying we don't necessarily want a DOI for every little thing because, of course, Crossref, why a big part of their raison d'etre is we're going to make this resolve persistently, which Jeff Builder is very, head of their tech, is very quick to say. Persistently doesn't mean forever. Nothing's forever, but we're going to try real hard for as long as we can. That's a big burden to take on for a blog, for instance. Or for a figure. A great example is a huge percentage of so we have all the DOIs in the database, right? As part of this, we have 90 million DOIs in a database, all the Crossref DOIs. You would be like, it's amazing how many of them are figures, like from a PLOS paper, something like that. And you don't want to treat those the same way that you would a different kind of DOI. So for instance, if I was going to make a reference set and say, hey, you got 10 tweets on your paper, what percentile are you in? Seems like a pretty straightforward question, right? I mean, of course, you got to think about the time and stuff like that. But do you include a figure in that percentile in your reference set? Well, no one's really tweeting the figures. They're tweeting the articles, aren't they? So it's not a very fair comparison. So these are some of the questions that come from like what is going to have a DOI. And I think right now, in practical terms, it's sort of shaking out to be, I think data site is mining quite a lot of the what we might call volume DOIs, where it's not meant to be something that's a precious treasure that's carefully guarded forever. And Crossref, I think, is trying to move more into the higher, and you guys have a lot of experience with PKP with DOIs, so you might be able to share more than I could.
Yeah, I think all I'd say is that like the DOI space is, or just the general identifier space is growing, and all of these folks are talking to each other. Between, I think, DataSite, Crossref, and ORCID, those would be the big three for me. And like they're all working coherently in this space in a really good way. So watch this space is what I would say there. But yeah.
Great, and I think that brings us to our time, if I'm not mistaken. Is that about right? I don't have a watch, so.
Got a couple minutes.
All right, we got one more minute. So one more question. It's always nice to say one more question. One more question from anybody? That generally means people want to leave. So why don't we head out? Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it. Give yourselves a hand for being a great audience. And grab us during the conference if you have other questions. Thank you.